I'm Coulter Wonkite. I'm already into the 420, damn it.
Legacy 420 has medicinal and recreational products down to a science, literally. With 2 biochemists on staff and a chief scientific advisor, every product is tested in the Legacy 420 laboratory. Legacy 420, Tyendinaga. Open 9 to 9 every day. Visit legacy420.com.
So what are you doing?
Nothing.
Nothing? Why not?
Trying to get on this Lifestyle Radio website.
Sounds like a cool website.
Yeah, it's alright. Oh, wait, I might have it.
You might have it.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
The opinions expressed during this show are those of the individual participants and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of their associated organizations or Lifestyle Radio.
You like music, you like weed, well, we gonna be good friends indeed. This is how much I like more than smoking trees. They'll make you dance the do-si-do and teach you how the chiva grows. Smoke a bowl on the 420 radio show. On Lifestyle Radio.
Yes, it is. This is the 420 radio show. We are live here at Lifestyle Radio. Actually, no, we're not at Lifestyle Radio. We're at Ganjahnista, 242 King Street East in Hamilton. If you're out there listening and you want to come in and hang out and chat with us on the show, please do. Tonight, we are joined by Mr. Jack Lloyd, a longtime friend of the show, and as well as Debbie Stultz-Giffin, who will be along eventually. The guys were in a conversation at the beginning of the show. We've got a lot to talk about with Jack, and we do have a bit of an agenda. So I'm going to let Marcel and Jack talk about what they were talking about off air there for a few minutes, and the rest will just happen as it happens. Hi, Jack. How are you?
Man, that's a long-ass intro.
Wow, man. I think we lost Jack again. He'll come back. Jack is really busy, and so he may.
Or did we lose Al?
No, I'm here. I'm here. What do you mean lose me?
Oh, maybe we lost Al.
Don't say that. Hello?
I think he was having some computer problems because he wasn't able to text me, so I don't know.
Well, I'm talking. They can't hear me. So we're going to fix this. How's that? Is that better, guys?
Can hear you now.
All right. I've been sitting here talking to myself, and I did a long intro. So what I said was you guys were chatting off air there, and you wanted to continue. So I'm going to let you do that, and I'm going to fix my microphone.
We're chatting off air? No, we were waiting for you. So we could chat on air.
We're on air, so you guys can have your conversation that you were having when we were off air. That I said, wait,
okay.
You know that one?
So Jack can tell us about Nova Scotia.
Yes.
A very good lawyer in Nova Scotia argued an injunction case there named Sarah White with Patterson Law, a great lawyer. And she fought very hard for compassionate access there. And the ruling was very interesting in that essentially what the court said is that whenever someone's like, can you hear me? Yeah, can you hear me? Okay, well, what's really interesting about it is that typically, if you're alleged to have breached a municipal bylaw, you are presumptively going to get an injunction against you. That is the de facto rule. What's quite fascinating is that so no matter what, you're going to get. We're going to get. Sorry, I've got an issue going on. You're going to get that injunction placed on you, and that's in fact what happened. So they did place an injunction against that premises, but what the judge did is she ruled and said, I appreciate that sick people rely on these spaces to access their medical cannabis, most especially at a time when, the government stores are empty and the government stores don't have the specific products that certain medical patients need. So she says, but there are other illegal dispensaries within the municipality, so people can attend there in order to access their medicine. So it's heartening in a sense, because it's finally a court is acknowledging that the government is relying explicitly on the gray or black market for medical cannabis access, rather than sort of acknowledging that what they ought to be doing is licensing these shops. So very interesting.
You got to step back just a second on that one. The judge said that there was plenty of other illegal shops for patients to go to?
That's what the judge said, yeah.
Wow.
That's basically trying to monopolize, what, 5 shops in the province?
A little bit, but also what they're saying is that we acknowledge that the government program is broken and that patients need to go somewhere, but that concern isn't trumped at the interlocutory stage. So at the immediate stage, by the breach of a municipal bylaw. But what I strongly suspect is that they're going to win when they run the final injunction.
Yeah.
So, very interesting.
So, Marcel, would that mean that these other shops that have charter challenges that are still remained open, does that mean that they're does that mean that we're wasting the court's time and they should just be left alone and say, here you go?
Well, no, but what may happen is the judge may hold off in rendering a decision until after those decisions come out of those charter challenges.
Okay.
So there's a ruling coming on February 28th on this issue. So hopefully something good flows from the court, and our community isn't simply just trammeled into the dust by legalization.
Yeah. Well, they've been doing a good job of it.
Well, here we are.
The thing that puzzles me, guys, is the fact that for the last 5 years we've been working up to this legalization thing, or more, 25 years, some people would say, I guess. And here everything's fucked up on that end, but they've taken our medicine. Like, I mean, who am I now?
Well, you're just that pothead owl.
Now I'm just another guy in the pile. I have no legal. I have no legal way of obtaining my medicines unless I go down the road to somebody who's a grower, licensed or not. Doesn't really matter at that point. I can prove that I'm medical, though.
Well, the important thing is that medical users are the only ones with a constitutionally entrenched right to access medical cannabis. So that's really the crucial difference. So, we're fighting now, like the final fight is to make sure that, and there is a fight to be had to make sure that there's access sites for medical cannabis patients, because otherwise, ultimately the government's goal is for everything to be recreational, right? So
yeah.
That way, nobody's able to say, hey, you violated my constitutional rights by behaving in a certain way. But at its core, only medical patients have that, and that right is supported by essentially every level of court in the country. So we've done lots of work fleshing out the scope of those rights, and they're extensive. So medical is still protected, but what we really want is to make sure that safe spaces for medical are protected, and that's really kind of what we're fighting right now.
Like where I am now at Ganjahnista.
That's right, yes.
Yeah.
All right, now I want to know what Debbie was going to say before Al jumped in there.
Hey, Al, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
I just find it overwhelmingly interesting, the approach of the government provincially as far as legalization and patient rights go, and comparing the two. In December, our finance minister here in Nova Scotia was reported in the media as going after Health Canada because, dear God, there's not nearly enough cannabis for the recreational market. We're coming up short, and what are you going to do about it? The finance minister. Yeah. Never once has any MLA in this province opened their mouth to the federal government to do anything to assist a patient. It's discouraging from that perspective.
What's more discouraging is when you find out we have the highest paid politicians in the country.
Well, there's that too.
Yeah. You guys are out east are in a fight of your own. I mean, you know, you've got some real restrictions. Like, you're not even allowed to smoke in public. Is that right?
Huh?
Are you out in Nova Scotia? Are you not allowed to smoke in the open? Out on the street?
Smoke. I do.
I know you do, but I mean,
I'm not stopping.
I'm not stopping either. But
they want to take me to court. I know, Jack.
No, that's Halifax, the city of Halifax.
The city of Halifax has some stupid rule that you can go walk 10 blocks to go smoke a joint. But I'm a medical patient. Smoke it when I need it.
So, Jack, can you explain the difference? I mean, it's a simple difference. It's either you're medical or you're not. But why?
From a governmental perspective or
legalities perspective?
So the main difference falls to, in a sense, the Malmo-Levine case, which in which recreational cannabis failed ultimately to garnish any constitutional protections, whereas medical cannabis has profound Section 7 protections in place. So if you're a medical cannabis patient and you require it for medical reasons, then that requirement trumps other issues. So you're much less likely to see sort of prohibitions on activities for medical. It's also why medical has access to higher potency extract products, has access to edibles.
But they don't. That's the problem.
Well,
legally, they don't have access to that unless they make it themselves, or under the Smith ruling, they can buy it from another patient.
Yes, that's fair to say. What you would be saying really is that you can make it yourself, or you can have a responsible person under Part 14 of the Cannabis Act. You could have a responsible person assist you in making your cannabis extract product. But functionally, and I just finished like 10 weeks in court arguing this, so we're trying, but functionally, a person, isn't able to, like, it's next to impossible to find someone to make you edibles, right? Like so it's much more likely, and in reality, what happens is that edibles companies and private cannabis derivative product companies produce them for the medical market and make sure that they're safe, make sure they're in compliance with Health Canada regulations and everything like that. So, we're self-regulating essentially our community, and then every once in a while the government arrests a bunch of people, and that's essentially the status quo. But for medical patients, you're absolutely right. They are still struggling, and sort of what we're fighting for and fighting about right now is for medical patients to have their own stores. So recreational people can go to these fancy 25 stores in Ontario and across Canada, either government-owned or privately owned stores.
Not in this province.
But in Ontario, there's no stores yet. There's only going to be 25 stores. And the core issue is, and this will apply across Canada, is whether under Part 2 of the Cannabis Act federally, what's called a medical sales license, whether that medical sales license is going to be functionally capable of being utilized to have medical storefronts. So there's a path for us, and I'm working on it, and I'm going to try to fight it. There is a path to have a place like Paula's there licensed, and there is a path to have a place that's medical only licensed, so that the vast array of derivative products required by medical patients are available. And that's ultimately the goal. So we're trying, but the government, is against us still. So there remains a few fights to be had.
It's tiring, though, isn't it, Jack? I mean, we're at a place now in 2019 where probably the number one conversation in the world, now don't quote me on this, is probably close to being marijuana or cannabis, whatever you're calling it these days. It's a deep subject. My mom is the president of the Ontario Seniors Association, Jewish Seniors Association, and the conversation most of the time around the meetings is cannabis. How can it help? Can we get people come in? Tweed has come in and lectured them. It was more of a recruiting than a lecture, but they came in and they answered some questions. And then my mom, and I've told this story before, so my mom says to me, Alan, says, my friend knows what you do, and she said to me, Rosalind, I got a question for your son. Said, I've got some medical cannabis, I got a license, and it's in my freezer, and I don't know what to do with it, because they're not telling seniors or anybody else what to do with it. You're not allowed to say, okay, hey buddy, this is the strain that I tried and I know your ailments and I think you should try it because it might help for you. I got ADHD too. I can't say that as a bud tender, can I, Jack?
Well, the province is specifically barred from interacting at all with medical cannabis. So that's really the main issue. So no, they can't say to you, yeah, this is probably helpful to you. And what they're finding on the ground is that people, essentially the employees are saying through one side of their mouth, I cannot speak to you about the effects of this product and what it may do to you. And then through the other side of their mouth saying, hypothetically, if you were trying to get to sleep, you might really love this product.
That's bullshit.
It's a compelled speech in a certain way, and also a serious freedom of speech issue. So, it's a serious issue that
is it an argument that we're going to be able to push? Do you think?
Well, I'm going to argue it. Certainly.
I hope I'm able to come in there and sit and watch that argument, Jack. I've heard you speak, and we've talked many times, but one thing that I want to do is sit in a courtroom and watch you work, my friend.
It tends to be pretty boring. But,
I know. I used to work for a lawyer as a kid. I was his driver. I used to spend my afternoons sitting in courtrooms watching him work.
You were the driver for a lawyer because he lost his license for a DUI?
Yeah.
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 All right.
Lawyers are human too, right?
You're the second person that I met that was a driver for a lawyer for DUI.
Yeah. It was my first driving job when I got my license. and I did that for 5 summers. And I, by the end of the second year, I was doing title searches down at City Hall by myself. So.
And Jack, you might think it's boring in court, but there are a number of us that I think have become courtroom junkies when it comes to
cannabis trials.
Cannabis and patients being prosecuted.
There's some. I'm sure that you could hand over scripts of court cases that you've done, Jack, that they could turn into a Law and Order easy.
I don't know about that, but.
Well,
But I'm doing my best. It's
Can you let's take a breather here, because I'm sure we've got some listeners that don't know who Jack Lloyd is, like we know who Jack Lloyd is. Jack knows shit, and the shit that Jack knows is the law. And tell people your credentials, Jack, just so people know that you're very serious about what you do.
Well, I've been a cannabis legalization activist for certainly all of my adult life. Before I was a lawyer, I worked as the editor of a cannabis publishing company called Green Candy Press. So I did books about the cannabis plant, with a focus on making them really, really good-looking books that, before then, cannabis books had kind of been like, they looked like they were self-published, and they didn't look like mainstream books. And so my kind of act of protest was, I'm going to make my books look like Random House published them. And then what I ended up doing was making my books like look way better than any other publishing house would do them, because the profit margin goes down when you spend more money on the book. But if you've ever had a chance to read a book from Green Candy Press, they look very, very good.
They are awesome coffee table books for sure.
Coffee table book. Mine's a Bible.
They're sexy, Marcel.
Yeah. Now, we've reviewed a few of the books from Green Candy, and then we ended up with our first grow guy, Professor Lee, who still comes on the show now and then.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, he's been around for a long time, but I guess my point was asking you to say that because I want people to know that Jack isn't a lawyer that went into this cannabis side of things. He's a cannabis activist who became a lawyer, and this is his life, and we love him for it, because he's helped a lot of people, not only in the cannabis industry in Canada, but individuals who have a valid fight on their hands. So for all of us, thank you, Jack. And now that I got that out of the way, you said when we first called you that you had some things that you wanted to bring up and questions that you wanted to ask us. So why don't we take the next half hour and do that, and then at the top of the hour we'll take a quick break so we can all have a pee.
Oh, okay. Well, I suppose I have some updates on the state of the law. So there are some big injunction cases ongoing. So there was the big case in Vancouver involving cannabis dispensaries there, and that was a loss for the community. So, and a very curious ruling. So that ruling essentially found that the city of Vancouver was justified in issuing what's called the MMRU, that was the medical marijuana related use bylaw, which authorized storefronts to become advocacy centers for medical cannabis. Although when you look at the way that the city council debated it, it was clear that they were licensing cannabis dispensaries. So at its core, what the ruling says is that the city of Vancouver was jurisdictionally entitled, so they were lawfully allowed to license medical marijuana dispensaries, using their language. Of course, I prefer the word cannabis over marijuana, obviously. But the ultimate failure on that end was a failure to deal with the very serious issues with the mail order program and the supply issues faced by the LPs. So it's good in a sense, because if the judge was essentially going to say, no way, this is outrageous, I prefer for him to focus just on the municipal regulation rather than the federal program, because there's hundreds of thousands of Canadians facing very serious criminal charges relating to the cannabis plant. And of course, they have a valid defense relating to the viability of the federal medical exemption program. Regardless, at its core, the ruling supports the municipal licensing regime, and by doing that, it says, listen, if you didn't have a license, then you're, de facto guilty of operating a business without a business license, and we're imposing an injunction on you to stop that activity. And it was a final injunction, so that means, fight over if, don't violate it. We are appealing, so there'll be lots of interesting things going on in the stay application, because there's a lot of sick people that rely on these shops to access their medicine. And even when you look at Health Canada's data, like BC has de facto opted out of registering with the Health Canada program. So orders through the LPs are extraordinarily low from British Columbia, and that's really down to the fact that it's very easy to access in a reasonable and dignified manner through the compassion clubs and dispensaries that operate there. After there's another ruling then in Halifax, and that ruling is really interesting in that the interlocutory injunction is imposed, and that shuts the shop down. So that's really bad for patients. But the judge, interestingly, said, I recognize the patient harm, and ultimately, in our view, we can those patients can attend at other illegal shops to access their medicine. So there's an implicit acceptance on their end of the black market being, a valuable member of the reasonable access regime. And so the final injunction, I think it's quite telling, and I suspect that a very good lawyer named Sarah White from Patterson Law in Halifax argued it, and she fought extremely hard, and in my view, quite successfully, because the judge acknowledged reasonable access as requiring in-person. So, in my view, it's a significant achievement, because, how can it be that cannabis is the only medicine that you can only order through the mail? So, and finally, and this leads into sort of where I want to do a sort of a call to action for two more pieces of litigation that are forthcoming. So Hamilton and throughout Ontario has been experiencing sort of the opposite effect. So in Hamilton, there was a case in which an injunction was sought against a medical cannabis dispensary, and the injunction was denied. So essentially the dispensary was able to continue providing medicine, exclusively medical cannabis, to its medically approved patients. And so it's a significant win for our community. It was really the only time that we haven't just been squashed by the government. So the consequence of that case was a massive proliferation of access points within the city. Certainly, the culmination of that since October 17, 2018, has been the introduction of the Ontario provincial legislation relating to medical cannabis, and that's the Cannabis Control Act 2017. And under Section 18 of that act, the police, rather than having to seek an injunction, usually that they would do that in essentially working as a team with a municipality. They would seek an injunction seeking to shut down a shop, because they have to actually have a very large trial in order to do that, because that's the final injunction hearing. Instead, what appears to be happening is they said, okay, listen, we're just going to issue, we're going to change the locks and seal the premises pursuant to Section 18 of the legislation. And then, we don't care if we win or lose the case against these people. We just want to lock the doors. So the problem for patients is that if you have a local shop that you really rely on, then you've got a pretty serious difficulty, right?
Yeah.
Because indiscriminately they can simply shut the shop. All they need to do is attend, have a reasonable view that it's operating as an illegal shop, and they can shut the doors. So it's very concerning. I intend to litigate against it. And what I'm interested in, and where my call to arms is coming from, is that I need folks to come forward, because I need affidavits from people, because I think really that the cure to this in Hamilton is for a patient group to come forward and say, hi, we're challenging this, and to take them to court over it. There's a lot more to be said about that, but I'm going to leave it there for now. So my call to arms essentially relates to that, because I need people to come forward and share their stories. But I also, there's going to be a federal court case dealing with these same urgent, serious access issues relating particularly to access to high-potency cannabis derivative medicine for exactly the reasons that we were speaking about before we got on air, which is that it's very difficult to access your medicine lawfully through the government program. And if you require a cannabis derivative product that's in a higher percentage than the government authorizes, then you have to make it yourself, or you need to have a responsible person, a very generous responsible person, make it for you. And functionally, it just doesn't work. Boots on the ground says that sort of system doesn't really work for people that need much higher potency cannabis medicine. Even from a price perspective, they can't access through, if you were to purchase the LP oil, it would be very, very expensive. Regardless, that's going to be a federal court case that we'll be arguing. So I am looking for people, and I'm hopeful that they can contact my office. I'm hoping that they can do affidavits talking about all of the difficulties they face, so that we can seek to have some kind of relief through the court, because otherwise the government's simply going to run roughshod over this, and there's going to be a lot of sick people that have really specific requirements under the program that aren't going to be able to get that. So that's where we're right now. Sorry to ramble, but that's okay.
I was just going to ask you, Jack, if you wanted to give out your office number or an email for people to get a hold of you.
Sure, yeah. That's really the best bet is to I share an office with John Conroy, so best bet is I'll give you the number. So the number is 604-852-5110. That's 604-852-5110. And then you can email, my office, and it's info@Lloyd, LLOYD, law, LAW, corporation.ca. So info@LloydLawCorporation.ca. Awesome.
Is there anything else that you wanted to add to I got a chat thing here. Let me see here. Oh.
I will add, I think an email went out that appears to be from my email address, but it wasn't me. I'm not sure how it happened. Oh, so really? I didn't send that email. I agree in spirit with the email. I didn't send it, and I'm not sure how or for what purpose it was sent out.
Really?
But regardless, I agree in spirit with what the email says. I just, as a lawyer, I have to be very cautious. I'm looking into how the email went out. It may have been that I was CC'd and somehow on this email program it made it look like it came from my email. I'll note that when you look at it, it says Jack Lloyd, and there's 3 L's in my name. So of course I only have 2 L's. It's a lot of L's, but not that many L's in my actual name. So and there's some. I agree with in spirit with what these people are arguing. Like, this is really crummy when they just shut the doors of these places. Wow. But I did not send the very cautious on that.
So somebody's spoofing you.
I don't think so. I think someone maybe tried to send like a bulk email, and somehow I got listed as the originator of it, and I don't know how that happened.
Is that your email address?
The email address that's listed is my email address.
Okay.
But there's if I go through my sent folder, I never sent all these emails that I'm getting all these contacts, essentially from journalists. So like a mailing list, perhaps. So, or it went out on a newswire. I just say that for clarity because.
You know what? And I did see at some point in the body of that a newswire thing. I'll see if I can find that again.
Yeah.
If you would rather not receive future communications for Medicine My Way, let us know by clicking here.
Okay, so that's a patient. That's a patient rights group, very well-meaning patient rights group. So I think it's an honest error. I just don't understand how it happened. But regardless, they're right. I don't know if they're right. I'm very cautious when I put things in writing, but I do think that you see my point is that I went to argued this, and the court agreed with me, and then the government refused to come have this fight. So, and then instead they just issued a new rule that can get around this court case, and I would they ought to just come and beat me fair and square. Rather than do it that way. So I agree with the spirit of the note, but
it wasn't you.
Although the government will dispute it. The government will say that's a misrepresentation of Allard, that's a misrepresentation of the Loftus order, but at its core, nothing changes the boots on the ground, which is that our community needs safe spaces to congregate. And there's been a large-scale shift in which very large companies have sort of taken over this industry, so that actual cannabis people have nowhere to access or consume their medicine. So I appreciate the government's just trying to legalize cannabis and move forward, but it's really
they're not playing.
The core issue is harm patients, and in a lot of ways it is.
And for so many chronically ill people, their sense of community and extended family is gone.
Yeah, and Professor Andrew Hathaway has just an incredible expert report on that issue, which has to do with for medical cannabis patients when they go to compassion clubs, the interaction that they have there is so crucial to sort of how they interact with the cannabis plant. So,
I actually had the pleasure of listening to him present it in court in Halifax when Sarah was presenting her evidence. I was there one morning and he was testifying and
who was testifying? The Health Canada expert?
Hathaway.
Oh, wow, Andrew did it. Oh,
yes, he did. And it was phenomenal, Jack. It really was. It was, as a patient, it was heartwarming to sit there and listen to him.
He, 20 years ago, him and Kirk Tusaw each put on a special wristband at a drug policy conference and said, we're going to wear this wristband until cannabis is legal. And broad strokes, we should be so happy we've got legal cannabis. There's fights still to be had, but Andrew Hathaway is just one of the unsung heroes. So that you just made my day that you saw him testify, and he did a great job. And Sarah White just did an incredible job with that case. Wow, good.
Now, Can you not hear the passion in that man's voice? I mean, come on. gives me goosebumps, Jack, when you speak. Do you guys want to take a quick break and we'll come back fresh?
Sure, if you want.
Okay, let's do that. I got a song that's one of my favorites from Sensi Rock, Roll Up, and this is the 420 Radio Show. We will be right back with Jack Lloyd and Debbie Stultz-Giffin and everybody else.
Legacy 420 has medicinal and recreational products down to a science, literally. With 2 biochemists on staff and a chief scientific advisor, every product is tested in the Legacy 420 laboratory. Legacy 420, Tyendinaga. Open 9 to 9 every day. Visit legacy420.com.
Hey, this is Cheech. And this is Chong. And you're listening to Lifestyle Radio. What is it? Lifestyle Radio. Say it one more time. 420 Radio? Ooh.
Hang up and try again.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
Oh yes, me roll it. Me not care what you say, strictly herb it and me brain. Yes, me love the cannabis, yeah. Me name a Senserakia. Me always have Mary's line. Oh yes, me roll it. Me not care what you say, strictly herb it and me brain. Roll up your ganja spray. Roll up your ganja spray. So you can pass me the whistle. Pass me the whistle. I wanna be less spliff. If you have the ganja, can't smoke with anyone to beg everything. You got something for yourself. Smoke ganja hard. You got the whistle on. Oh yes, me roll it. Me not care what you say, strictly herb it and me brain. Yes, me love me cannabis, yeah. Me name a Senserakia. Me always have Mary's line. Oh yes, me roll it. Me not care what you say, strictly herb it and me brain. Roll up your ganja spray. Roll up your ganja spray. Alright, you never see me beg you feel no like that. No rolling paper, no ganja. Me own things always there. In a me backyard, me grow a big cali tree. As soon she a go ready, me a go smoke her nice and steady. So now the herbs come around. Me a fair rising in the morning, me a go pick up from the ground. That's my where this came from. Sensera coffee, me name and me marijuana off the floral. Oh yes, me roll it. Me not care what you say, strictly herb it and me brain. Yes, me love me cannabis, yeah. Me name a Senserakia. Me always have Mary's line. Oh yes, me roll it. Me not care what you say, strictly herb it and me brain. Roll up your ganja spray. I know. Roll up your ganja spray. Oh, it's the healing of the nation, yes. I got to smoke my ganja weed, yes. And then now smoke the seed. Neither figure kill the breed. No. Roll up this place now. Oh, me love me some Samina. So you must get up live marijuana. Whoa, yeah. Roll up your ganja split. Roll up your ganja split. Ganja split. Roll up your ganja weed. Yeah. Roll up your ganja split. Smoke ganja till your head red. Roll up your ganja split. I grade go
Hi, we're back.
Everybody's going to be thinking, the fuck's so funny, man? You're back.
Sometimes.
Go ahead and ask your
the silly
Go ahead
stuff
and ask
is
your
on
question.
the end. Yeah, ask your question.
My question? Oh, yeah. Okay, so I had a question regarding flying with cannabis, or even just, I guess, carrying, I guess it's both. It's a two-part. Carrying cannabis in public as well as flying with it. As a medical patient, it used to be 150 grams maximum, or was it like 30 days? I can't remember. I know it was 150 max, and now recreationally you can carry 30 grams. So I guess my first question would be, can you carry 180 grams and combine the two together?
Yeah.
And then you can.
So Health Canada's been very clear about it. It's part of a broader conversation that they're creating. But so if you're an approved medical patient whose authorization to possess allows you to have 150 grams of cannabis for your supply, you are also authorized to purchase and possess an additional 30 grams of recreational cannabis, which can be added. I'll note, I like this because it means more people having more cannabis that they can access. That makes perfect sense to me. But what's troubling about it is that in authorizing that and giving that distinct point to the community, what Health Canada is really saying is that we see no difference between medical and recreational cannabis, and we intend to make it so that only recreational cannabis is on the table. So it just kind of reiterates, in my view, that they've just been dragged kicking and screaming by the courts to the point where they're allowing people to have access to medical cannabis. So there's a lot of over-regulation relating to cannabis. And hopefully in 20 years it's not even a question. But the short answer.
Also apply to 4 plants, Jack. I mean, I've got a 49 plant grow. Can I add on 4 plants to that as well?
Well, it depends if it's your household.
Well, yes, that's what I'm talking about, in my household. Yes.
So as long as you're the only person, then arguably yes. Although I have not received direct confirmation of that from Health Canada official.
So what is it? It is 4 plants per address, per household, per building, per house. What?
That's right. Yeah. So from per household.
So if there's just for happenstance a condominium that somebody buys and there's 40 units in there, each one of those units could effectively legally have 4 plants in them. Correct? Unless it's, of course, against the condo rules or whatever. Right?
Arguably, yes.
Okay. So if a medical patient has their grow, they can add those 4 plants on per household address, basically.
So if you're a medical patient that resides at 123 Main Street, and your medical authorization allows you to have 10 medical cannabis plants to have grow your medicine.
Yes.
And then I have not had direct confirmation of it, but my reading of this is that you can. But I'm not providing legal advice here.
No, of course. Deb, what have you heard on that?
It was my understanding that patients were allowed to have the 4 additional plants along with everyone else per household.
Per household. Marcel, you're hearing the same thing?
Hearing the same thing. You can grow if you're a medical grower, you can grow your medical license worth plus 4 plants.
I love how the government says per household. So that means if you're rooming with somebody else and you're both adults, then you're going to have to split it 2 for each of you. But if you have separate units and it's like a divided apartment, Unit 1, Unit 2, I'm assuming those constitute as separate households.
I think it would have to have separate and distinct addresses, identifiable.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, mailing addresses, from what I understand, per mailing address.
Okay, so I guess, Jack, my next question, the additional part of that would be the rules then would still apply to flying, right? As long as you're going within Canada?
Could you repeat the question?
Oh, sorry. I guess we kind of talked about some other things in between. The 180 grams carrying on you, would that also apply to flying? Could you then fly with 180 grams as long as you're staying within Canada?
Arguably, yes. In my view, essentially in general with these, in my experience, what happens is that you've got two types of police that just lay a charge and say, we'll let the lawyers figure it out. And that's a really serious problem for people because, once you're charged with something, there's a lot of work that goes into dealing with that charge. And then there's police who look at it and say, okay, this is on the lower end of things I'm concerned with, move along. It's not tested, right? So you want it when you're traveling, you want to have all of your documentation organized. And in the event that you've got your 150 grams of medical cannabis, for which you've got your documentation that authorizes it, and then you've got 30 additional grams of cannabis, you're going to want to have documentation that shows that 30 additional grams is licit cannabis. That's really the legal distinction that they make between them. So they say, is this licit or illicit cannabis? And you want to make darn sure that it's licit cannabis.
How can they tell?
Well, I agree with you entirely. And anyone every Crown I know has admitted, certainly to me, that it's pretty much impossible to tell whether cannabis is licit or illicit.
Bud A came from this place, an LP somewhere in Canada, and Bud B came from guy down the road who has a medical license and is pretty damn good at it.
Yeah, that's in one way to look at it, and but that burden of proof falls to the person making the allegation, right? So that's the police and the Crown would have to do that. So they're very unlikely to take the time to do that. But that's where we're at right now with this.
Being legal, the only right response would be, I grew it myself. Therefore, it's legal cannabis because I'm allowed to grow my 4 plants.
Well, that's correct. You are allowed to grow your 4 plants, and the cannabis that you harvest from that, so long as it's stored at home, is completely licit, and so long as you only leave home with only 30 grams of it, it continues to be completely licit. But my recommendation would never be to make those statements. If you're interacting with law enforcement,
don't tell them shit.
Well, no. It's just you have to always tell the truth. So if you did actually secretly purchase it from somewhere that's not licensed, you can't then say to the police, "No way, I grew this myself," because you can't lie to authority. That's actually a different criminal charge. So you never lie to the police. You either tell the police the absolute truth or you remain completely silent. And my advice is always just to remain completely silent.
Yeah, because the truth hurts, and they don't like the truth.
But
there's that, but I think Jack's coming from it from a slightly different perspective.
Right, so don't call the cop an idiot because the truth hurts.
Those batons would hurt, wouldn't they?
Yeah, they do.
Marcel.
I just want to go back onto that. The problem that I see that's going to be coming down the road is a lot of patients or a lot of people that have been growing their 4 plants are now have harvested or at the point of harvest. The police pull you over here and they find out that you have cannabis. They want to see your sales slip from when you purchased it at our wonderful liquor store.
Well, that's why it's so very, very important that you're in compliance with the regulations, right? Like, we did it as a country. Like, cannabis is legal now, and there is actually kind of an onus for us to make gosh darn sure that we're doing our absolute best to be in compliance.
Not to screw it up for everybody else.
Yeah, and don't get yourself charged now that we've got it legal. Like, we did a good job. Nobody. People are going to get charged. It's hard to avoid that, but we're really getting close to a point where nobody's going to jail for cannabis, and it's not a huge concern for people anymore. I'm really excited about that. But at its core, if you grew 4 plants and the guy finds you with your 30 grams in the trunk, and you say, yeah, I grew 4 plants pursuant to, authorized by law, and I keep it with me, and I store it properly, then they can't do anything to you. Right. But if you grow 15 plants instead of 4, then technically you're violating the regs, right? And then you invite some jeopardy.
If you're going to tell the cops that these are from your 4 plants that you grow because you only grow 4 plants, then you better only have 4 plants at home, because the cops very likely are going to come and check.
They might.
Right, because some of them just like to be like that.
Well, and speaking of checking, pre-legalization search warrants were required for law enforcement to come into one's home. Does that remain the same, or are they allowed to just come in now and check to see what everybody's doing in regard to their 4 plants, if that's what they're keeping at?
So repeat that question. I'm so sorry, Debbie.
That's okay. I think it was a little bit convoluted. Before legalization, for law enforcement to come onto private property, it was required that they had a search warrant. Yes. Obtained through the proper channels. Some folks have been saying that with legalization, law enforcement can come into your home to check to see if you only have 4 plants growing, and that a search warrant isn't required. Could you speak to that for just a minute?
The only power of an investigation relates to medical cannabis gardens, and it's never been exercised, and I think it's very unlikely that they would. Typically what they would do is they'd say, we've got serious concerns about the electrical and fire specs at this premises, and so they'd send in the fire department, and the fire department would go in as a surreptitious investigator for the police. For recreational cannabis, you've simply got permission to grow 4 plants, and that permission doesn't carry with it some sort of authority for the police to come check on those 4 plants. That I disagree entirely with that. I don't think a judge is going to ever support a cop saying that they went there to just to check on someone's 4 cannabis plants in the backyard. That's not going to go very far.
That's certainly good information to get out there, because there are a number of people that are sort of functioning under that premise.
Like your privacy interest in your own home is incredibly large. Like if you're growing your 4 plants and you're in compliance with that, the police have no right whatsoever simply to come in there and bother you. And if they do, you should sue them, because the legislation has changed. Like, if they violate your rights and they don't find any criminal issues, you can take them to court, and there's a remedy under the charter, because your Section 8 rights have been seriously infringed if they didn't get a warrant, or if they got a warrant that's justified on the grounds that they suspect there's illicit cannabis there after seeing 30 grams. Like, the core of this fight going forward is really, really diligent, really diligently being in compliance with the regs, like malicious compliance. That's how you stick it to the government.
Malicious compliance.
Is that what they call it now?
That's what I call it anyway.
Wow. She's walking away again. Paula just appeared, and she's listening.
Hello,
to,
Paula.
What we are saying, you'll hear her in the background. We were talking about affidavits and stuff like that, and I mentioned it to Paula where you guys are talking, and it's like I can count on both hands the number of people that I can get affidavits tomorrow for you, Jack. It's that serious. This whole being able to they've got. Did Paula? You just told me they shut down all the safe injection sites.
Yes, 2 weeks ago.
In Hamilton? Did you know that, Jack?
What happened?
They've shut down all the safe injection sites in Hamilton. Lack of funding, they said.
So it's, again, I certainly hope that, because it's clear that people that use opioids quite often rely on cannabis to get themselves off of it.
Yep.
So again, it's part of the same problem with the closure orders they're using against dispensaries.
And then take away the safe injection sites too.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
nice.
And that's one of the reasons we've started, I'm sure you've heard of it now. By now, Jack, we've started a HOPE project, the Hamilton Opiate Prevention Experiment.
Oh, good for you.
People can come in who want to get off opiates or relieve themselves of methadone or whatever. And it got cold, so people stopped coming in. But at first, we were having 10, 12, 13 people coming, and I'm hoping that as the weather gets warmer, we can actually find some cases to actually follow and see if it really works. Firsthand.
I love that idea. That's called a cohort study, and I think it's genius. And there's some fantastic researchers at McMaster there in Hamilton that I'm sure would love to participate.
We'll have to talk after and get those numbers.
I will definitely do that. Are you guys aware of the cannabinoid cannabis substitution project in Vancouver, where they do essentially care pack?
Yep, we've had Neil on the show, and he's just stopped.
He stopped running the CSP?
He stopped running. He announced the last week or beginning of the week that he has ceased the program. Don't know why. I'm going to reach out to him and find out why.
Oh, that's...
It's very sad, because he's the reason that I said to Paula, we need to do this. If we get a lineup of people... I'll give you an example. A gentleman came in here sent by his doctor to find out about HOPE. When he left, it was just like he felt so relieved that he could find a place to go to get some relief, as well as find out more information about using cannabis to relieve and get him off the methamphetamines.
Yeah.
Methadone is what it was. I think he's on now. So it touched my heart.
I had no idea that they were stopping it.
Yeah, it's disgusting. I mean, they say yes on one side and then they say no on the other.
Well, regardless, as far as motivations go, it sounds like it helps people, and cohort studies indicate that a great many precariously housed and homeless people self-medicate using medical cannabis. So, your heart's in the right place, and most especially if the safe injection sites are being shut down, it's a problem. And the solution certainly isn't shutting compassion clubs down.
Yeah, no, it's not. Now's not the time to turn people's backs away from getting medicine and finding out how to use it properly. Patients helping patients. How's that? And that's what every one of us on this panel today believes in, and I can assure you of that. Okay. Here's a question for you, Jack. On the whole helping patient and gifting, how far can you go with that? If a patient comes in and says, here's my script, and can you help me make some medicine and show me how to make it, can I do that without risking going to jail?
You have a great case. It's not, you're asking a lawyer, so a lot of people ask this question, so I'm hesitant to, so there are a variety of potential ways you could be charged for doing that. So, but arguably you could say, well, no one was allowed to bring more than 30 grams. All we did was allow them to, teach them how to process their 30 grams into a derivative product that's better for them for their use of cannabis. I think kind of an interesting comparison is tiramisu. So you've got a baker, and the baker goes down to the liquor store and purchases. I can't even remember what the liquor is that's in tiramisu, but so they purchase the brandy, I guess, and so they bring the brandy back to the bakery. Now the bakery doesn't have a liquor license, right? So the bakery is using a controlled substance to create a derivative product, and then they're selling it. But like we don't see large scale raids on bakeries, and so it's one of the differences between cannabis, because I can guarantee if you did that and you had 1,000 people a day attending there to process their stuff, the police would come and probably arrest everybody. So, but bakeries do it every day. So again, there's kind of very different enforcement with cannabis. But arguably,
I guess the question is how far are they going to go?
We don't know yet. Legislation is so new. So a lot of this stuff is just getting into court, all these new charges. So, we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Wow. So is there anything else that we want to touch base on while we have Jack here? Because he is a busy guy. I mean, he's working while he's on with us. So.
Do you have anything to recommend to patients who drive?
Yes. That's my question too.
That was my question too, Deb.
I've just an aside, I have multiple sclerosis. Hands down, I could go for 3 months and not consume cannabis, and I still couldn't pass their stupid roadside test because it mimics a neurological exam that goes hand in hand with being diagnosed with MS or determining how far your MS may have progressed. So I went to my doctor and have a letter that basically states that I have MS, and if I'm failing the roadside sobriety test, it doesn't mean I'm impaired, because I'm certainly not.
Well, I agree with you. You're identifying sort of two key issues with impaired driving legislation. The first is what's called the DRE, Drug Recognition Examination Expert. The problem with that is that it's a presumptive expert. So basically the person that's examining you is presumptively a person with expertise on this. So he may well say, you're definitely impaired, and you say, well, no, that's simply a part and parcel of my medical symptoms. Problem, particularly, Debbie, in your region, is that they then impound your car for 7 days and say you can't have your driver's license for 7 days, regardless of whether you actually are impaired or not. So it's incredibly tricky. So for you, you need to drive, right? You probably have to drive to the grocery store. You got to drive to various places, work, whatever. And for them to take it away, it causes you beyond serious repercussions. The secondary part of that, Debbie, is the per se limits on THC metabolites in your saliva when they do that test. And because you're a medical patient, you may well test over, and many people may well test over at any time. So there's gonna be a case, and I'm encouraging people, because you're right to ask me about that, because you face very significant jeopardy, not just because of your medical illness, but because you use cannabis medically, and you're going to have different per se limits. So a case is brewing, and we're going to need to get funding and get ready to fight sort of about whether or not a medical cannabis patient that's been smoking cannabis for 20 years, who's got a nanogram limit in their saliva that's too high, whether or not they qualify as impaired. From a practical piece of advice, here's what I can say. And this is, I think, probably the number one way to avoid these issues, because I'm a lover, not a fighter. I don't like to fight, but I will if I have to. Is store your cannabis in the trunk. Don't ever smoke cannabis within the cab of the vehicle, and don't ever store opened cannabis products or open cannabis within the vehicle. So many of us for years, we roll it in our lap while we're, before we go somewhere, and, maybe we have a puff in the vehicle, and then we get out and walk somewhere, and the car.
No more.
Yeah, don't do it anymore, and I'm as guilty as anybody.
That's admirable that you would even say that, Jack, because, when you think of your profession, you're like, oh, don't say that, man. Maybe somebody will say something. You'll lose your license. And that can't happen, though. Like people
Well, there's a difference. Like, I suppose if you're saying I'm making an admission, I'm saying I'm leaving my vehicle after rolling a joint.
Yeah.
They're not driving. I'm not making that admission. But under the legislation, essentially anybody that's consumed cannabis ever is going to fail this anagram limit. So it's an impossible test to pass.
Yeah. Do you think that there's going to be a waiver? I mean, I guess there's going to be so many challenges on those stupid driving limits that they're going to have to change them, I guess, eh?
Well, not necessarily. For all we know, the government has doubled down on the per se limits, so they're going to expend pretty significant resources supporting that legislation. So, and this kind of goes to my gripe with the government. So much work goes into what's called public interest litigation. So that's where it's what I'm proposing when I say that I need people to come forward and tell their stories about sort of all of the difficulties they face accessing their medicine, because it's literally hundreds upon hundreds of hours to litigate one of these cases. So then it's just frustrating when the government goes, okay, fine. And then they make just the most minimal change possible. And then they say, and we're going to charge people, convict them, and put them in jail until somebody else comes to court. Like that's the really shocking part. And that's why I think, a little bit of skepticism should be applied when we look at the government when it says, they're helping us with legalization. They're doing things. Is how much work went into a case like Smith? How much work went into a case like Allard? How much work went into a case like Murnau, Bear?
How much money does it cost to try a case like Murnau or Allard?
You're never paid what, like if you were a civil lawyer, it'd be like minimum $2 million or something. And what I can tell you is that we don't make that. So you're generally lucky to get paid for your time. But the point is it's public interest litigation, right? We wouldn't have legal cannabis if people didn't do it, right? If Fallon Young didn't organize Terry Parker to start all of this, and Aaron Harnett did it at the Court of Appeal. Like if he didn't stand up there, and if the Court of Appeal in Ontario didn't do that, then we wouldn't have legal cannabis today, and we wouldn't even have any rights associated with cannabis. It would just be, illegal. And I got a lot of comments. There were these two really wonderful and funny and smart lawyers in California that had this thing called Shut the F Up Fridays, which is they were these lawyers saying, we're going to give you legal advice if you're in a compromising situation. And one of theirs was about cannabis dispensaries. They said, listen, if you're inside of a cannabis dispensary and the police raid, shut the F up. You don't want to make any statements to police. And sort of they described it. And what they were talking about is, 3 kids activists working at a compassion club. And the police raid it, and I always, I imagine them creeping up on the Compassion Club, which has clearly marked operating hours. It's just the world's easiest case for the police. And they charge everybody. And what they were saying, because they're good lawyers and I respect them, and it's incredible, great advice that they're giving, but they say that one of the individuals remained silent, and he didn't say anything about what he was doing inside of the premises. And the other 2 told police that they were volunteers. And maybe they were volunteers, maybe they weren't. But what was the end of the story was they said, well, the guy that remained silent, all charges withdrawn, and the 2 that told police
why they were there.
Ended up with convictions. And what really troubled me about it is that there's telling the truth to the police isn't for our community. Telling the truth to the police, that's not the issue. People are there doing it openly and honestly and saying, hi, this is a really serious problem. Sick people can't get access to their medicine. It's not about and that's a traditional criminal law. I give that advice all the time. Do not speak to the police. But my point is that there's a broader defense and a broader argument to be made about this, and that you can take them to court and say, okay, well, why is cannabis illegal? And as Canadians, it's something we should be really proud of, is that people like John Conroy, Kirk Tusaw, Paul Lewin, Alan Young, they really did take the government to court over this and say, okay, let's have a big fight. And I just finished, I did 4 weeks in Vancouver, and I just finished a 5-week one in Toronto dealing with these issues. And, let's keep the government in line here. The government works for us, not the other way around. So I guess my point is that it's not as just as remaining silent, right? This isn't a crime like other crimes where it's just, the run-of-the-mill rights and you're going to have a trial. This is about a broader issue and a broader purpose, which is that this substance ought not to be, part of the criminal law, certainly, and that it doesn't harm anyone, certainly, and that, at every opportunity we should be taking the government to task over why on earth they continue to lock people up over a harmless plant. That's the real question. So while I loved their point, I said, well, why didn't you, these people then made a statement to police. So why didn't you take that and say, okay, well, why is that illegal? Isn't that a contravention of our charter rules? And there's lots of arguments. This is in California, but there's a host of other arguments to be raised. So it's not as simple as they made it. It's not as simple as remaining silent, right? Remaining silent, we would never have legal cannabis in Canada, right? Terry Parker couldn't stop talking about it. That was really the problem, and it led us here. So, and a great many other, people in our community, they can't stay silent about it either, and that's an important part of how we got here as well. So certainly. While my legal advice is to remain silent, I think it's important we appreciate just how far we've come by talking.
Cool. We're good at talking. Al is too sometimes until he falls asleep or breaks his mic.
Glass of water, if you must know.
You're not allowed to drink?
I'm not allowed to drink. I'm sorry. So, Jack, right when isn't this fucking shit legal? You know, like, why are we still having to go through this? This is
Well,
ridiculous.
you're not alone. A lot of people believe that, and so hopefully there's going to be a loosening of the regs so that lots more people can be legal, and that's really ultimately the goal. What I'm really scared of, from a big picture perspective, I'm really scared that Andrew Scheer wins this next election and says, all right, we're done with this bizarre experiment. Cannabis is super duper illegal again. And
can they do that?
Why not?
Yeah, he can if he wants to.
So when the government changes, if they want to put everything back to null and void again, they can do that.
Yeah,
sure. As long as they've got a majority.
You think that we're just going to sit there and let that happen?
Well, the fight will go on. So
and here I thought we could move on to mushrooms.
Well, I think that's a really important. That's a really important issue. I'm working on a couple of great cases on psilocybin medicinal.
You know what, Jack? If you need anything from that too, it has kicked my depression to the fucking curb.
Really?
And the chocolates, yes, mixed with chocolates and little fudge things.
All the stuff that Health Canada says you can have as edibles. You know, flavorful.
We're making submissions to. We're making submissions on that. That just seems prohibitions like that are kind of. You know what the funniest part of it I always said about cannabis edibles is that, like, it's not like I love the smell of cannabis. I love the way it looks.
I love the taste of it. Everything. Yeah.
Taste, but I don't I like the taste when I smoke it. I don't like it's a spicy, remember edibles 10 years ago? Yeah. Before people got really good at making edibles? I would never, it's not really that good tasting.
Jack, come visit me, buddy. I'll give you some ice cream. You won't taste anything.
It's Moon Mist, Jack. It's wonderful.
They've been sitting there drinking bourbon and eating ice cream all night long with us.
See, I thought you were going to talk about your chocolate salty balls. Those were delicious.
Oh,
Jack can come suck my balls if he wants.
Oh, good.
Everybody loves my balls.
Yeah, you better have some ready for me when I get there.
I don't have any ready at all. I can't make them fast enough.
I got a freezer full of them.
Coming to see you tomorrow, then.
She's got a freezer full of Marcel's balls.
Hey, Darcy.
Yes,
Define freezer full for me, please.
Well, I got 12. I got my Christmas present still. Well, minus one.
Oh, really?
12?
Yes.
I got fucking 1 when I was there. Huh. Fucking guy.
You're not as special as me, Al.
You didn't give me a fucking Christmas present either.
I can't afford to send it.
I can't afford to send them either.
So,
I don't know how balls would do in the mail.
That's so funny, guys. I'm flying back and forth. You could
Let's
just
get off your balls and go back to Jack. What was that, Mary Jane?
All right.
I'm flying back and forth. You know, just send some with me.
There you go. Ice cream.
Yeah.
Ice cream.
Do you want to fly with ice cream?
Yeah, there'd be none left. I'd share it.
Can I ask a question, everybody? Who's got the birds, Deb?
Darcy.
Darcy's got the bird.
That's Darcy.
So let's get back to Jack, because we're getting close to the last half hour of the show. Where do we go from here, buddy? Can you hear him typing?
From here, basically, there's going to be all sorts of interesting fights between the three branches of government. I'm hopeful that the end result is that the medical community simply gets its own access sites and is able to produce and supply its own shops with more specialty products that general the market prefers. So that's kind of the future of this. So recreational is going to kind of be a slow rollout, and they're working hard to get their supply up, but for whatever reason right now they just don't have enough product. Although Health Canada has released data that suggests that they have plenty of product, so it may well be, for lawyers we call it cooperative federalism, but it may well be that there actually is enough cannabis from the federal licensed producers. It's just that due to overregulation, it's not making its way to the market. I'm not sure what my view is on that, but I've heard that argument, and I'm not discrediting it. I'm not sure how it's happening, but obviously people with strict rules and how they operate are going to, it's going to be harder for them to get their product from point A to point B. But hopefully they're going to be able to do a good job of that, and hopefully they're going to be able to make great edibles and great derivative products. But hopefully as well, for medical patients with really unique requirements, there's going to be safe spaces and safe access points for them.
Well, I hope so. And until then, if anybody wants to learn how to use a magic butter machine, give me a call. I'll show you how to use it. So will Marcel.
Sure I will.
Yeah, we're going to have classes here. So, yep, it's time to...
You pay the airfare, I'll come and teach all kinds of classes for you.
Let's work on that. Maybe your boss will allow that.
No, I'm thinking your boss can allow that.
My boss?
Yeah.
Oh. You made her laugh.
Come on. Take some of them profits and put it back into it.
Yeah. Jack, it's always a pleasure, and I would like you to tell people where they can get in touch with you again if they want to become a part of this whole thing you're brewing, and tell people also what you're trying to do, just to remind anybody who just joined us.
So we're trying to make an argument, certainly in municipalities like Hamilton, where there's a serious housing crisis and a serious, certainly financial and medical issue, particularly in regards to the opioid crisis. We're looking for patients that can talk about how come shutting down their compassion club or their access point will harm them. And it's really... the government's purpose in legalizing cannabis was to get rid of the black market and protect Canadians. And, it's not doing either of them. Really, it's promoting the black market and harming citizens. So we're going to court over that. And then we're going to the federal court as well to deal with Passion Club access. And I'd like to speak with patients that have struggled using the government program, and we'll take it from there.
You know what, Jack? I think that what we should do is we should get this information out and make a day where people can come in and write out their testimony or whatever they want to say, videotape it, and then we'll just give it all to you, and you can go from there. And we're here happily to help with that. And I, like I said, I know at least a dozen people right now who would just be waiting in line.
Okay, well, I'd like to hear from them. So let's talk some more. I have a farewell party that I need to get. I'm now a little bit tardy for, but I would like to speak with you about that. I'm going to be working on this all weekend. So let's talk, okay?
I'm around. You know how to get a hold of me, buddy.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
So are you looking for patients from straight across the country, Jack, or just from Ontario?
Straight across the country for the federal court case. And actually, I would really love some patients from out east.
Several of us have affidavits prepared for the constitutional challenge that's going on in Ganjahnista next week, and I'll do my best to see how many of those I can get sent in your direction.
Oh, I really appreciate it. Yeah, I'm supposed to be helping on that, and I've been just slammed in dealing with things in Ontario. But that's a totally great case, and I would be thrilled if you were able to share. That's very generous of you.
All right. Deb, thank you. I didn't even say hi, really. Thank you for joining us. I always love talking to you. You know that. And you're always welcome to come and hang out with us. Marcel and Mary Jane, as usual, thank you. I am here with Paula and some of the regulars Friday night, 7 p.m. If anybody listening wants to come in and say hello, please feel free. We do Hope as of the 28th on Thursdays. If you have an opiate issue, if you want to wean yourself off, please send them over. It's just a conversation. We've always got coffee, and you may even leave with a Hope pack. Right, Paula? Right. There you go.
Hey,
Guys,
Darcy.
Thank you.
Hey, Darcy.
Darcy?
Told you he liked me more.
Why? Why you say that?
Because you just totally ignored that Darcy was even here.
No, I didn't. I didn't.
Yeah, you did.
Ignore that. No.
You thanked everybody but Darcy. That was rude. Was it because of his birds?
It was because of his birds. Yes, that's what it was.
Are you picking on me too, like the cops did because I'm in a wheelchair, Al?
Yeah.
Yes,
I'm the bully.
It's not because you're an asshole. It's because you're in a wheelchair.
Yeah, that's right.
I get that a lot, you know.
And if you got an issue, talk to my lawyer. All right, Jack, we love you here. Everybody else, this is the 420 Radio Show, and we'll be here next week. Night, guys.
Cheers, guys.
Good night, Jack.
Good night.
So what are you doing? Nothing? Why not?
Trying to get on this Lifestyle Radio website.
Sounds like a cool website.
Yeah, it's alright. Oh, wait, I might have it.
You might have it.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
Fuck no.
No, wait, do
no,
break.
we're back. Now we're back.
No, we're not. Everybody left.
They
all
reminded me.
hung up.
Did they? No, they did not.
They
Let's
did.
see.
Nobody's even fucking listening now.
Darcy hung up. Let's call him back.
See?
We're calling him back.
Well, you ignored him.
We're calling him back.
You're
We're
horrible.
not done with you yet, Darcy.
This is what happens when Al
No,
smokes
he
too
rolled
much.
away. All right, we're done.
Wow.
Good
Sorry. All right, I'm running this stuff. Good night.
Nice. Darcy.
So what are you doing? Nothing?
So
Why
Mary
not?
Jane,
Trying to get on this Lifestyle Radio website.
Sounds like a cool website.
Yeah, it's alright. Oh, wait, I might have it.
You might have it.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
Legacy 420 has medicinal and recreational products down to a science, literally. With 2 biochemists on staff and a chief scientific advisor, every product is tested in the Legacy 420 laboratory. Legacy 420, Tyendinaga. Open 9 to 9 every day. Visit legacy420.com.
So what are you doing? Nothing? Why not?
Trying to get on this Lifestyle Radio website.
Sounds like a cool website.
Yeah, it's alright. Oh, wait, I might have it.
You might have it.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
The opinions expressed during this show are those of the individual participants and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of their associated organizations or Lifestyle Radio.